Greetings, citizens. Hey you beautiful creepy human being you. Welcome to my channel and welcome to today's true crime video. I'm so happy we could meet like this. I'm so happy that somehow in all of this that we're forced to deal with on the day-to-day, today, you and I were able to find each other on this crazy little planet that we call home. My name is Brittany or Bratterstein, whichever you prefer, and today we're going to be discussing a man named Ricardo Lopez, or as he is more famously remembered as the Bjork stalker. But before we get started, if you have not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new video every single week, sometimes 2 a week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. One of us, one of us, one of us. Alright, now that I'm done begging you to join my cult, we can go ahead and get into this video. Now, this video is on a case that was actually recommended to me by 2 members of the Brat Pack. This was Jess Smith and Away. Hi, Jess Smith and Away. Thank you, Jess Smith and Away. And this is a case that I had heard of before, though I hadn't looked into the details of it, and I had not seen the infamous home movies that are, associated with this case. Now, I know this case fascinates a lot of people, and I know a lot of people have watched the video diary of Ricardo Lopez because they find it to be interesting or eerie, but for whatever reason, it's never really appealed to me. And I say for whatever reason, but I think I know why that is. And it's because though this guy did a terrible fucking thing, right? He did something so awful, and who he was as a person, I'm gonna say some of his ideals, real shit. I'm not into it. I wouldn't like him if he was still alive, which spoiler alert, he is not. But it seems very clear now that I have watched those videos and now that I have researched this case, that this man was very clearly mentally ill and spiraling out of control and could not really seem to do anything to stop himself or to save himself, and wasn't telling anybody what was wrong, and it just went and went until it came to a conclusion that is so messed up. And it's hard for me to sit and watch these tapes, like before this, to sit and watch those tapes knowing that, because it just felt weird to me and it felt off to watch somebody basically just self-destruct. I mean, basically, figuratively and seriously self-destruct. But for the purposes of this video, I have now watched those videos. I saw the progression, saw him lose his absolute shit, saw the obsession with Bjork just get more and more intense before finally he did the unimaginable and he took his own life, and he recorded that as well. And I wouldn't recommend watching these tapes if that kind of thing does get to you, because that kind of thing does get to me. I don't like watching people struggle so hard with their mental health when you just want to kind of reach in and be like, bro, like, just ask for help, talk to somebody, and you can't because this person is already gone. So I did watch them, wouldn't recommend you do so, but in order to make this video, it was required. So today I'm going to tell you the entire story. I read all the things and watched all the things so that you do not have to. And now at the end of this video, I want you to answer the question of the day. I'm going to give it to you now so you can have it kicking around in your brain as we go through the details of this case, but of course I want you to answer once you have something to go on. And really the question of the day is just like what do you think could have been done to just make this story have a different ending? Like, where could someone have intervened? What could have been done to have saved this man's life and made it so he didn't go on to do the horrible things that he did? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below after we go through the details of this case. And now, with all of that said, come gather around and let me tell you the story of Ricardo Lopez, or as he is better remembered, the Bjork stalker. Our story begins on September 16th, 1996, and this is in Hollywood, Florida, not California. There's also a Hollywood, Florida. And it's on this day that the manager of an apartment building, the Van Buren Plaza Apartments, woke up at around 7:30 in the morning to a weird smell. This person goes to investigate, and in following their nose, so to speak, they find themselves outside of apartment A, and this seems to be where this odd smell is coming from. And as they look at the apartment, they can see that under the door frame of the front door, there is a substance, a goo kind of coming out from under the door frame. So they're like, that's not good, and they call the police. Because I mean, if you add the stuff coming out from under the door and the fact that there's a weird smell, it doesn't seem like this is gonna turn out okay. And I can only imagine that this person didn't want to just open the door themselves and see whatever was behind that door. So officers arrive, and pretty immediately they recognize the smell that this landlord is smelling, and it is the very familiar smell if you have smelled it. Luckily I have not, but it's the smell of decomposition. So they know they're going in there and they're finding something or someone who is deceased. So they let themselves inside the apartment and they take in this horrid scene. And what they see is the badly, not super bad because it hadn't been a long time, but the partially decomposed remains of a man. And the weird thing about this is that this man had like shaved completely their head, their eyebrows, everything was shaved off, and their head had been painted in like these zigzag stripes, the color of a watermelon, like red and green, which is already weird. And they were also able to tell that he had been dead a little while, like it wasn't something that happened today, it had been a couple of days. And it was clear that this was a self-inflicted gunshot wound. That is how the person had died. So that's already a messed up scene to take in. But then they start moving through this apartment, and as they look more thoroughly around this place, a more disturbing picture is coming into focus. So there was writing like all over the walls of this guy's apartment, and I'm remembering it in my head as it being written in red, but it's very possible that it was written in black. The mind's a funny thing, and it can play tricks on you, and you can remember things differently. But what it said is what was the most important, and it said, quote, "The tapes were the documentation of a crime," end quote. And when they looked around the apartment, it was clear what he was talking about because there were videotapes everywhere. It seemed like this guy recorded himself quite a bit. And this apartment was a disaster. He very obviously did not take care of himself. So amongst all the tapes, there was also clutter. It was not a nice apartment. But there was also a video camera. When they took in the scene, when they're looking around the apartment, there's a video camera. And it's sitting right in the center of the apartment. And it's pointing like directly to where he had taken his life. And when they looked at the camera, they saw that the eyepiece had paint on it. So it seemed clear that he had like shaved his head, painted his face, checked to make sure the frame up was right before sitting down and taking his own life. They then look at the camera and they see that there is a videotape in that because this had been recorded, right? And on the videotape there was writing and it said, quote, "Last day." Last day was written on it. So they decide to watch this video. And in watching this video, they realize they need to get out of this apartment quickly and start moving towards saving somebody else's life. Because on this video, among other things, he admitted that he had mailed a bomb to a woman he had become deadly obsessed with. 21-year-old Ricardo Lopez had sent a bomb to the Icelandic singer Bjork. So let's talk about Ricardo Lopez a little bit here. Ricardo Lopez was the youngest of 3 children, and he was born on January 14th, 1975 in Uruguay, but moved to the United States when he was young, settling in Georgia. Ricardo was very loved. He was super loved by his family, and he was especially loved by his mother. He seemed like he was probably his mother's favorite, and that's because he was her little baby and kind of a miracle baby because he had been born later in her life. Like she had had 2 kids prior, waited a long time, wasn't planning on having more kids, and then got pregnant with Ricardo. Now, because he was born later in life, or maybe not because he was born later in life, let me explain. So, Ricardo was born with a super rare condition called Klinefelter syndrome. And this syndrome is said to be more likely to show up in babies that are boys, because it's only in males. Male babies that are born to older mothers. So, mothers who have babies later in life have the possibility, though it is rare, to have a baby with this syndrome. So basically what this is a condition that shows up in boys, and these boys that are born with this condition are born with extra X chromosomes, and this can cause low testosterone, reduced facial hair and body hair, reduced muscle mass, little to no sperm, and like a small ween, among other things. Babies who are born with this can grow up to look a little bit different. They can be tall and lean with broader hips, long limbs, and sometimes even gynecomastia, which, if you remember, is the condition that Tim Lambesis developed after he stopped taking steroids once he got arrested for trying to murder once he got arrested for trying to hire somebody to murder his wife. And if you do not remember what I'm talking about, it is basically man boobs. It is the technical term for man boobs, and this is something that Ricardo did have. Anyways, I don't know if it was because of this disorder, though I do know that this disorder did make him self-conscious about himself, but he did grow up to be shy. He was more reserved. He kept to himself. He didn't make a lot of friends. Once you did get to know him, he did seem normal. Like, he was a little awkward, but he wasn't somebody that you'd look at and be like, oh, there's something wrong with this kid. He was just a little bit shy, but he did have a few friends here and there growing up, but never any girls. He didn't have any relationships with women, no girlfriends, no friends. The only female he had any sort of connection with was just his mother. But by all accounts, despite that, he had a good life and a good family. Like, he wasn't born to a family that didn't love him, didn't give him attention. He got everything he needed. He even said, like, in his video diary that he had a good, loving family and that he just didn't appreciate it because it had always been there. And he was the type of person who didn't seem to, like, value anything he had at all. Which is unfortunate because that does seem to happen. People take what they have for granted. But anyway, growing up, he was super into art. Okay, this is something that he had a big passion for. And he even dropped out of school for a bit. Like, he left school to try to chase this passion, but it didn't really go anywhere. And then he decided he wanted to go to college. And he thought about doing that for a while. But again, that didn't really go anywhere. So once he got a little bit older, he actually ended up moving. He left Georgia and he moved to Hollywood, Florida, where he got a job at like a pest control company that his brother owned. So he was like, this isn't working out, this isn't working out. It's mostly because he didn't put in the work for it to work out. So then he's like, okay, well, he's family, he'll give me a job. So he does that, he gets the job. But the thing is, this is like a pest control job, right? So it's not really giving him the opportunity to interact with many people. So it just helped him slip farther and farther into like a reclusive life. And by the time he was an adult living in Florida, he had no friends. Like, the friends he had growing up, they were gone, and he hadn't made any new ones. It was just him, himself, and he. Now, in being a shut-in with no friends, he really became interested in and eventually had an emotional crutch on media. He was super into pop culture and celebrities in general, and he seemed to know everything that was going on in that world, especially when it came to women, famous females in movies, in TV, in music. That was his bread and butter. But he would sort of get himself into a place where he felt like he had a bit of a real relationship with these people. It was a parasocial relationship, but he felt like it was a real relationship, and that his life and their lives were kind of intertwined in one another, which is a bit strange. It's fine to like be really into movies and shit. Who isn't? I love movies. But to be like, oh, we're like friends and like it's a thing is a bit strange, though it does happen. But his would go to the point of obsession. He would watch a movie or a TV show or something. He'd see a woman that he was attracted to for whatever reason, and he would become immediately obsessed, into the point that he'd have to watch everything this person made, get photos of them, like learn everything they could about him. He was very obsessive in that way. He would keep numerous diaries, which eventually became video diaries, that were filled with this stuff and just his thoughts in general. And he called them his art, the stories of his life. He would write and talk about the stuff, and he would say that these diaries were a part of him. And it was very interesting and chilling, to be honest, to see his videos and watch him and see how he sort of operated. He admitted in these videos that these things that would happen where he would be interested in these women would start as a crush, but would turn into an obsession. And you could see that he acknowledged this, but that he seemed powerless to stop it from happening to him. And he said he'd have moments where like he would have calm, where he wouldn't feel so intense and obsessive about these people that he did not know. And then he would have instances where it would flare up and it would get worse than ever. And it's just wild because he seemed so aware, right? He seemed to acknowledge that this was a strange thing that he was doing. And he said that he knew right from wrong. He just didn't care. Now, earlier on, it would be less intense, or at least the interest would last less time, is basically what I'm trying to say. He would find somebody that he was very interested in. He would get super obsessed. It would be hot and heavy. And then it would sort of fizzle out and he'd move on to the next person. This was kind of his cycle. But that would soon change when he no, he didn't meet her. That's the point. When he discovered the subject of his biggest obsession, the one that we're talking about today. And this is when, in 1993, an 18-year-old Ricardo Lopez became obsessed with a woman and remained obsessed with the same woman for years. And this was Bjork. So he first discovered Bjork when he was sitting at his house flipping through the TV and landed on a music video for the song Human Behavior by Bjork. And he immediately became transfixed and the obsession began. He immediately went out and got a bunch of photos of her, a bunch of posters of her to put up on his walls. He went and got all of her albums that he could. Anytime she came on TV, he would record it so that he could rewatch it over and over. He even went as far as making a sculpture of her face, which is, you know, people are artsy. That's cool. He was a bit weird about it, but sure. He would even go and try to find every bit of information on her he could so he could feel even more like he knew her. He would even pay companies that their whole existence was to sell celebrity information, which I did not know was a thing, but it was. And he would actually spend money to get information on Bjork, which is just wild to me. He was even able to get her address, which is such an invasion. But once he got her address, he wrote her letters over and over and over, and he would create art and send her this art, and it was like weird and dark and twisted art. And she never responded to him. And that really upset him. He would fixate on the fact that she wasn't acknowledging him and seeing how important he was and seeing what sort of connection they had. And this made it so that he felt like he could never be happy. And because of this, because he felt like he could never be happy, he would try and find his happiness by imagining them together and playing scenarios of the two of them together in his mind. He even said that he would imagine himself going back in time as a time traveler so that he could meet Bjork when she was a kid, so that he could know her fully through her entire life. Which sounds fucking so weird and sends all the creepy, kid adult vibes. Not good. But at the same time, he said that it wasn't like a creepy sexual thing, that he wasn't even sexually attracted to her. He said that he could never have sex with Bjork because he loved her too much, and his vision of her in his mind was this sweet, innocent, pure little person. He said that it was more of a spiritual connection, and then he said that he looked at Bjork the way Hinckley looked at Jodie Foster in Taxi Driver, like the sweet, innocent, pure child. But the difference here is Jodie Foster actually was a child. And if you don't know this reference, let me give you like the smallest little synopsis of backstory. So there was this man named John Hinckley Jr. a while back. I don't actually know if he's still alive. I should look into it. It's not important for this. So John Hinckley Jr. watched a movie called Taxi Driver, which if you haven't seen it, it's a good movie, you should. But that's not important here. He watched this movie and became obsessed with Jodie Foster, which is an issue for a couple of reasons. One, Jodie Foster's gay, so even if she was like old enough to be interested, she wouldn't have been. And two, more importantly, the most important thing, she was literally 12 when this movie was made. She was 12 years old. But okay, this guy was so obsessed with a 12-year-old Jodie Foster that on the afternoon of March 30th, 1981, this guy went and shot the president. He literally tried to murder, but failed to murder, Ronald Reagan, because he thought that this would get this child, Jodie Foster's, attention. If he was to kill the president, Jodie Foster would be like, my stars, I love this man. Which is weird. And this is how Ricardo is saying that he sees Bjork. And speaking of John Hinckley real quick, are any of you interested in seeing me do a video on that? Because I have never looked into it fully and I feel like it would probably be very interesting. But I could always do that for just like my pleasure. But let me know if that's something you'd want to see. My pleasure. But let me know if that's something you'd want to see, because that could be an interesting video. But anyways, that's what Ricardo said. He looked at Bjork the way Hinckley looked at Jodie Foster, and he said he saw himself as sort of a father figure to Bjork, which is strange because Bjork was literally older than him, and that he just wanted to hold her. All he wanted was to hold her and to have her hold him back. And in this video, he's kind of holding himself, and he says that he had become the master of self-embrace. So he says there's nothing sexual to it. He couldn't have sex with Bjork because he loved her and he saw her as like a child and he was her dad, right? But I'm kind of calling bullshit on that. And that's because in his video diary, he said he only wanted to, quote, give her pleasure and satisfy her needs. Which he doesn't say it in a sexual way, but those are some sexual words in my opinion. And he would also write about how he felt less than and not as good as other people. And he seemed to hate himself and his body, and how he just didn't like himself and wanted to die, and how he couldn't get a girlfriend. So to me, it seems like there might have been a bit of a romantic edge when it came to his obsession with Bjork, because why would he be writing about all of these things in the same breath? You know what I mean? Like, about wanting to satisfy her needs, and about him never having a girlfriend, and about his low self-esteem with himself physically, but saying that it had nothing to do with sex. I call bullshit on that. And another reason I call bullshit on it is because of how he reacted when he found out that Bjork got a boyfriend. Because what kicked off this whole going from just being obsessed to doing something very, very dangerous and trying to kill her was the fact that Bjork had started dating British music producer and DJ Goldie, which is so interesting because I had never heard of Goldie in my entire life. Had never seen this man in my life. But I just started watching a TV show that is not new by any means, and it's called Livin' Single. It's from '93, I think. Never seen it before. My husband told me about it. I started watching it. It's great. But in one of the very first episodes, Goldie made an appearance, and I had never seen him before, and then did research on this case, learned who he was, and then saw him in the show. And I was just like, what are the odds of that? I guess 50-50, because it either would happen or it wouldn't, but I just found that to be interesting. Now, Ricardo was pissed about this because her getting a boyfriend went completely against the image he had of her in his head as this innocent, pure little girl. He said it was unacceptable and inexcusable. And he had an even bigger problem with the fact that Bjork's boyfriend was a black man, because Ricardo Lopez was a racist piece of shit. That's my biggest issue. Well, not my biggest issue with him, because he had a lot of things he did wrong, but it's a big fucking issue because he would say some fucked up stuff. He would say some really disgusting slurs, which I'm never going to repeat, but in watching it, it immediately made my blood boil because I can't stand a racist. It really fucking irritates me, to say the least. But he would say this and he's like, maybe he's a nice guy, maybe he's a respectful guy, but he's still, and then would say a slur, and it's just absolutely fucking gross. But he is obsessed with Bjork, loves Bjork, she's cute, she's innocent, he wants to hold her, he wants to embrace her, and then as soon as she gets a boyfriend, he's like, well, now I gotta kill this guy, and Bjork has to die for the way she's betrayed me. Excuse me, sir? This is a Wendy's. And then he decided, oh, I love making video diaries. What I should do is document this entire process of me planning her assassination, which he went back and forth between wanting her dead or just wanting her horribly disfigured, and he kind of teetered on which thing he was going to do. And he did. He recorded himself as he discussed this plan. One of his earlier plans was to somehow inject needles that had HIV infected needles, bro, into her thumbs. I don't know how he planned to do that. Then he kind of switched it. Was like, what I'll do is I'll send a bomb that has HIV infected needles into it that'll shoot out into her. And then he's like, okay, maybe not. That doesn't really sound so great either. What I will do, though, is while she's in London, I'm going to send her a package. And inside this package, there will be an acid bomb. This is what he decided was the best course of action here. He said in this video, he's like, you know what? When she gets this package, there's just going to be a big boom. And basically, he designed a bomb that it would be in a package, obviously. When she opened this package, which was a book, she'd open it, and it would spray acid all over her face in an attempt to either kill her or disfigure her. But either way, he would have a huge impact on her life, and she would remember him. So he was going to go to New York so that he could send this package, so it would arrive at her home in London, and he could go through with this batshit crazy ass bananas plan. And he really planned this, dude. He tried different types of acid, and he used these acids to like run tests on different things, different foods, before eventually saying he was going to test the acid on himself to make sure it would be as effective as he wanted it to be. Just the pure amount of video footage there is of him testing and planning and talking about this and obsessing about this is so frightening. Especially because, dude, he had never met her. She has no idea who he is. He had never met her. He had never even gone to a show of hers. But he's so obsessed to the point that he wants to kill her. And he's celebrating his successes when he saw, he did a prototype, when he saw just how much acid would go all over it. It was like a picture, like a drawing of a person, and the acid went all over it. And when he saw how disastrous this would be, he called it art. And he said, quote, "I will die a monster." To me, it all looks like the ramblings of a man who's completely out of his mind. But he wasn't completely out of his mind, because he was with it enough to know that he didn't want to get caught for this. He sat and he brainstormed with himself. He's like, okay, I want to send this from New York so it's not coming from my house, because, hello, he's in Florida. So I want to send this from New York so it arrives in London. But once it arrives in London, they're going to be like she's going to get hurt. And then they're going to be like, okay, this came from America. Now we have to backtrack to find out where it came from. So he wanted to put as much distance between him and the bomb as possible. And he's sitting there and he's like, oh man, the biggest issue I have here, something that I really messed up with, is sending her all those creepy little letters and all that creepy art over the years, because if it wasn't for that, they'd have no idea it was me and they'd never catch me. And man, he was very against being caught. He didn't want to get caught for this. He didn't even want to be a suspect in this case. He didn't want to be questioned, because he said the day he was questioned is the day he'd be caught, because he would break like a piece of glass. But despite that, he was gonna do it anyway. He said he had to do it. He said she had to be punished for what she did to him. What she did to a person she had never met, bro. And he said of this quote, "I am the angel of death for her." He said he needed to get her attention. He needed to get her to notice him. He needed to get her to want to watch the 80 hours of video footage he had made about her, which I don't know how she'd do that if she's dead, but this is what he's saying. He's saying he wants to be the most important person in her life, the most influential person in her life. And the best way he could do that is by murdering her or severely maiming her. He sat and planned this for months, dude. This wasn't a little thing. He planned it and he planned it and he took breaks and he started again. He tested different types of acid to make sure it was strong enough and to make sure it was lethal enough. He even reached out to her record label so that he could get an address. And he did this by saying like that, I believe it was that a casting director was going to be sending her a book that they were thinking of turning into a movie that they wanted her to take part in. And this is how he got the address so that he could send this to her. So on September 12th, 1996, he went to the post office and he mailed this bomb. And he made sure to bring a gun with him to the post office in case anything went down, because it seems like he was gonna send this or die trying. He then came home and he took a pair of dull kitchen shears and he recorded all of this. And he cut off all of his hair before going in and shaving it completely clean and shaving off his eyebrows. He had like no hair on his head at all. And then he painted his face in these colorful zigzag stripes. And for whatever reason, also painted his nipples. He then took a canvas, a white canvas, and painted just the words, quote, "the best of me," on the canvas before setting it like on the couch, on the back of the couch, where he would be seated in front of it so that when he shot himself, it would be splattered with his mind, I guess, which would be in his mind the best of him. And then he sat there and he just waited for his apartment manager to leave so that nobody would hear what happened. He looked into the camera and he said he wasn't depressed or drunk. He knew exactly what he was doing and he just wanted to say, fuck the world and fuck Bjork. But then he added that this was all for her, that his death was for her so that she could see it and so that his pain could be some sort of compensation to her for any pain that he caused her. He then sits there listening to Bjork's music, and when it gets to the very end of his favorite song, he takes a gun and he takes his own life. It's actually far more graphic than that and very difficult to watch because you can see that this person is scared. For one, he's like hyperventilating in the video, breathing so hard. You can tell that he is so unwell and that he had allowed himself to spiral to a place that he just could not seem to get himself out of. It's just so sad because people knew he had problems. Like his family knew that he had issues. They just didn't know how bad it was. And he was even in therapy, but he didn't talk about any of this. And it just seems so frustratingly avoidable and tragic. He was literally 21 years old when he killed himself. But back to the investigation, I guess. This is the video. This is the video that is in the recorder when police find his body. So in this video, they see him take his own life, but they also see all the plans for the bomb. Not all the plans, because there's lots of videotapes, but they do see some plans for the bomb, and they see the actual bomb. He had videotaped it. So they see this bomb on video, and they see the blueprints for the bomb around his apartment, but as they search his apartment, they can't find it. They had seen it was like in a large hollowed out book, and that book's nowhere to be found. But they have to be sure that it's not there, so they actually evacuate his apartment building, and they actually evacuate everyone within a 1 mile radius because they don't know how powerful this is going to be, and they search his apartment high and low, but they don't find it. So they know now that Ricardo had mailed this bomb to the UK days ago, so they needed to contact authorities in the UK so that authorities in the UK can try to intercept this bomb and try to put a stop to Ricardo's fucked up plan. So police in America contact the Scotland Yard. They tell them everything that's going on. They're like, hey, you might want to look into this because there is a bomb on your bus. And Scotland Yard scrambles to try to locate this package. And somehow they do. They don't say how they do, but somehow they're able to intercept it. They get the package in South London. They take it to like an undisclosed but safe location, and they actually do detonate it. And they said that when they detonated it, it was very powerful. It would have been successful in its intent. Well, not its intent, in his intent. In the package's Christmas destiny. Now, once Bjork realized what was happening, what had just went on, what could have happened to her, she was truly blown away. She had no idea this was happening, no idea he even existed, and to hear he was trying to kill her and then killed himself, it was like a lot for her, but she said that she was fine. She would always be fine. She was mostly just worried about her son because she was a mother, but she said her son handled this whole situation in a very brave way. I watched interviews of her after the fact, and she honestly seemed more sad for Ricardo than even for herself. She knew that she'd be okay and that, you know, this would slide off her back. It was scary, but it would be something that she could recover from. But he wasn't going to recover from this, and she couldn't believe that he had actually gotten into that bad of a mental state. And she was such a sweet person that she actually sent his family, his parents, a card and flowers because she could recognize how hurt they must be. She was in London at the time that this happened, and she had been working on an album, but she ended up stopping and she left. She went back to Iceland and she went home, probably so that she could just kind of deal with this in her own way, in her own place, without having to worry about work and just be in the comfort of her own home. But before she flew back home to Iceland, she made a statement saying, quote, "I find it very sad that people get into that kind of state." And with that, my friends, is the story of Ricardo Lopez, or as he is more famously remembered as the Bjork stalker. I hope you found my telling of this to be informative and that it made sense. And of course, I just want to thank you for remembering Bjork with me today. Now, considering everything I told you throughout this video, I want to revisit the question of the day, and that was this. What do you think could have been done to make this story end differently? Because it's just so tragic. I mean, don't get me wrong. He made terrible choices. He had some really fucked up ideas about people and life, and he wasn't a good person. But for somebody that young to be struggling that badly for so long, like such an intense spiral, like what could have been done to avoid this? Because there has to be something. I just, let me know all your thoughts in the comments below, because I am at a loss. I'm at a loss here. Anyways, guys, before you leave, don't forget to leave me a comment down below with what case you'd like to see me cover in the future. As this case indicates, if you leave me a suggestion, I try to cover it. And anytime you leave me a suggestion, I add it to my list with your name next to it. So if I do cover it, I can give you a shout out. I like looking into the cases you guys suggest because they're often cases I haven't heard of or cases that need more coverage. And I know you're filled with good ideas and good taste. Otherwise, you would not be here. If you haven't already, please don't forget to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new video every single week, sometimes 2 a week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you. And if you want to hang out more consistently, all my social media is listed down below for your convenience, along with a link to my membership where you get early access to non-sponsored videos, priority comment responses, things like that. And now with all of that said, I just want to thank you for being here when you could literally be anywhere else in the world. That is tight. You are tight. Please stay safe and be a better person than you were yesterday, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.